My name is Emma Warren. I'm 32 years old living in a quiet town just outside of Boston. Most mornings I make myself a cup of espresso, listen to the weather report, and walk to my office, a biotech company I co-founded with two college friends. It's not a life that's easy to explain, especially to a family who never really tried to understand it. To them, I was always the strange, distant daughter, the one who stayed late at work, wore plain clothes, and spoke more about projects than parties. Meanwhile, my older sister Claire was the shining star, beautiful, charming, effortless. Even during holidays, I felt more like a background prop than a real member of the family. 2 years ago, on my mother's birthday, I offered to come home early to help celebrate. My father told me not to bother. He said my presence would embarrass the family next to Claire's new boyfriend, a successful CFO. And if I insisted on coming, he said I should not call him my father anymore. I thought that was the end of the story. It wasn't. Because 3 weeks later, at the very party I was banned from, Claire's perfect new boyfriend looked at me, froze, and said, "Hi, boss. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed silent or spoken up?" Share your thoughts below and make sure to subscribe for more true, unforgettable stories. Growing up, I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. While Claire loved ballet lessons, recitals, and sweet 16 parties, I was the girl tucked into a corner with a book about biology or a laptop. Open building projects. No one understood. I wasn't trying to be rebellious. I just didn't fit into the perfect picture they wanted to paint. My parents, James and Laura Warren, adored Claire. She was everything they could proudly introduce to neighbors and coworkers. Soft-spoken, polished, and natural at making everyone feel charmed within minutes. She always knew what to say, how to smile at just the right moment. It wasn't her fault. She was born to be the daughter they could show off. And me, in family photos, I was the one awkwardly standing at the edge, half hidden behind someone else's shoulder. At Thanksgiving dinners, relatives would gather around Claire, asking about her latest boyfriend, her job interviews, her apartment renovations. If anyone remembered I was there, they'd vaguely ask, "Still doing that science thing?" No one ever asked about the sleepless nights I spent perfecting grant proposals, or the countless hours fighting to keep my startup alive through the brutal early years. No one ever celebrated the public health project I helped design that secured life-saving funding for rural clinics. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy to explain at a dinner table, so it simply wasn't seen. Over time, I learned to stop expecting recognition. I poured everything into my work, knowing that if my own family couldn't see me, at least the world might one day notice. It was a lonely kind of determination, but it kept me moving forward. Then came the silence, after college as my company grew. The phone calls from home grew fewer. Holiday visits became shorter. Eventually, even birthday wishes turned into text messages that came a day late, or not at all. I convinced myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was too busy to notice, too mature to care. But deep down, every unanswered call, every forgotten holiday left a small bruise. And bruises, when left long enough, harden into scars. 2 years ago, I thought maybe things would change. I thought maybe if I made the effort to come home early for Mom's birthday to show them I still cared, it would make a difference. That somehow it would bridge the quiet canyon that had grown between us. Instead, I was told not to come. Not because I had done anything wrong. Not because there wasn't enough room, but because my existence, plain, hard-working, unpolished, might ruin the perfect image they wanted to present to Claire's new boyfriend. A man I hadn't even met. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not with anger, not with rage, just with a heavy final kind of clarity. I realized that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I gave, no matter how quietly I tried to fit in, I would always be the daughter they hid behind closed doors. And maybe it was time to stop knocking. The day my father asked me not to come home. It wasn't even a long conversation. There was no drawn-out argument, no shouting, no drama. Just a simple clipped request. And a silence heavy enough to crush whatever hope I had left. I remember hanging up the phone and sitting there, the late March sunlight slipping through my window, lighting up the dust in the air. The espresso in my cup had gone cold untouched. It felt like standing at the edge of a bridge I had spent years trying to rebuild, only to watch it collapse without warning. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just sat still for a long time, feeling something quiet and final settle into my chest. I realized that family for me was not a place I could return to. It was a memory I had to finally let go of. That night, as I sat by my desk staring at the screen, savor bouncing slowly across my laptop, I opened my banking app almost on instinct. Month after month, year after year, I had quietly paid my parents' electric bills, water bills, cable internet, $6,000 a month, sometimes more. When emergencies came up, I never hesitated when they asked. Mom would call, her voice sweet but a little urgent. "Emma, honey, the fridge broke down. Claire's had a rough month. Could you help out?" And I did. Every time I scrolled through the transaction history, seeing line after line of payments, steady, reliable, unquestioned. $15,720 over the past 2 years, almost $16,000. And still, I wasn't enough to be introduced to a stranger at a family party. I hovered my mouse over the auto-pay settings, electricity, internet, water, cable. One by one, I clicked cancel. No confirmation emails, no warnings, just a small silent checkbox disappearing from my list of obligations, just like I had quietly disappeared from their lives. I sat back in my chair feeling a strange hollowness wash over me. Not guilt, not anger, freedom. The weeks passed slowly. My mother's birthday crept closer. I worked late at the office, traveled to New York to close a new investment deal, kept myself busy with project deadlines, and in the back of my mind, I braced for the inevitable storm. On the morning of my mother's birthday, I woke up early. The Boston sky outside was thick with a low-gray fog, heavy and unmoving. The kind of weather that makes everything feel heavier than it already is. I made a cup of strong black coffee, sat on my tiny balcony, and listened to the world breathe. At 5 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Emma, why is the power out? Can you check for us?" I set the phone down, not replying. A few minutes later, another message, Dad this time. "No water, no internet. Call the providers, your mother's freaking out." Still, I stayed silent. It wasn't stubbornness, it wasn't revenge. It was the understanding that I was no longer their solution, no longer their safety net, no longer the invisible hand that quietly fixed everything without thanks or acknowledgement. It wasn't about making them suffer, it was about letting them finally experience what life looked like, without me quietly saving the day. At 6 p.m., another message from Claire. "Emma, the internet's down. Guests are coming, Mom's about to cry." "What's going on?" I typed out a reply. One short, sharp sentence. 3 weeks ago, Dad said if I insisted on coming home, I shouldn't call him my father. I'm just respecting his wishes. I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message without sending it. Not because I regretted it, but because I realized it didn't matter what I said. They had already decided who I was to them, an inconvenience, an embarrassment, a background character in someone else's perfect story. And no message, no explanation would ever change that. I placed the phone face down on the table, leaned back in my chair, and watched the daylight slowly fade into a heavy, silent night. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It almost felt peaceful, because for once, I wasn't fighting for a place where I was never truly welcome. That night, after the messages stopped flooding in, I sat alone in the quiet of my small living room. No apologies. No, "Are you okay?" Just demands. Fix the internet. Fix the water. Fix the image. It was all they ever asked of me. I thought about every bill I had paid, every emergency I had smoothed over, every late-night phone call I had answered. Not because they loved me, but because I was convenient, because I was reliable, because I never said no. Until now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to pick up the pieces they dropped. I wasn't pretending their indifference didn't hurt. I wasn't swallowing my pride just to keep the peace. I was simply silent. The next morning, I woke up to gray skies and a phone buzzing with new messages. Mom again. "Emma, please, it's Mom's birthday. Can you just help this once?" Dad Colder. "Where are you? The guests are arriving. This is unacceptable. Fix this." Claire, more desperate. "Emma, seriously, Liam's about to get here. Mom's crying. You're ruining everything." I turned my phone face down without reading the rest. I wasn't ruining anything. They had already ruined it the moment they decided that appearances mattered more than family. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed again this time, a video call from Aunt Sharon. The only person in the family who still sent me Christmas cards, even when I never responded. I hesitated, then answered. Her tired face appeared on the screen, lit only by the faint glow of a flashlight. The power was still out. "Emma," she said softly, her voice trembling, "your mother's in a panic. The house is dark. Everyone's running around like chickens without heads." I stayed silent, waiting. She glanced over her shoulder, lowered her voice, and asked, "What happened?" I took a deep breath. My father told me I wasn't welcome, that I embarrassed the family, that if I insisted on coming, I should stop calling him my father. I kept my voice even calm. Aunt Sharon froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. In the background, I could hear my mother's frantic voice. "She's just sulking, she'll come around. No one would be cruel enough to do this today, sir." And then Claire, sharp and shrill, "Liam's almost here. Someone fix this. I can't believe Emma is doing this to us." I closed my eyes for a second, let the weight of their words settle without resistance. Aunt Sharon heard it all. She looked back at me, her expression shifting. Not to pity, but to something else, something closer to understanding. Before she could say anything more, someone else appeared in the frame. Liam, perfect suit, polished smile. Exactly the kind of man my family had been desperate to impress. He looked straight into the camera, and then he froze. "Emma," he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "You're Emma Warren," I nodded once slowly. No anger, no triumph, just quiet certainty. He turned to look at the chaos around him, the dark kitchen, the flustered family, and then back at the screen. In a low, stunned voice, he said to everyone in the room, "She's my boss. She's the co-founder of Pacific Genomics. She's the one who approved my transfer." For a moment, no one spoke. I could almost hear the walls creaking with the weight of it. My mother, still holding the half-frosted birthday cake, nearly dropped it. My father gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. Claire's mouth hung open, her face draining of color. The entire illusion they had built, the perfect family with the perfect daughter and the perfect party, crumbled in one breath. And I hadn't lifted a single finger. I gave a small, steady smile. "Hope your introduction today goes well," I said simply, then I ended the call. No anger, no screaming, no grand declarations, just silence and the truth. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time staring at the blank screen. No part of me felt triumphant, no part of me celebrated. It was just quiet, like the moment after a storm has passed and everything is too still. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, now cold, and let myself breathe in that silence. It wasn't revenge I had sought. It wasn't even justice. It was truth. And the truth had spoken louder than anything I could have planned. That afternoon, I turned off my phone. No texts, no missed calls, no desperate voicemails. I poured myself a cup of peppermint tea and pulled up the quarterly finance reports from work. Liam's name stood out immediately on the project transfer lists. In just 2 days, he was scheduled to officially start under my division at Pacific Genomics. It was almost laughable. The very man my family had bent over backwards to impress, believing he was the golden ticket to a better family image, was about to report directly to the daughter they had pushed aside, and they had no idea. Or at least they hadn't now. Now they knew there was a poetic symmetry to it all. For a brief moment, I wondered what Claire was thinking, how she would spin the story, how my parents would justify it. Maybe they would tell themselves I had somehow tricked everyone. Maybe they would pretend it wasn't that important. Maybe they would decide it was easier to act like it never happened. It didn't matter. For the first time, it truly didn't matter. 2 days later, Monday morning arrived crisp and cold. I walked into the office early as usual. The building still smelled faintly of fresh paint and new carpets, a reminder of how far we had come from those first messy startup days. At 9 o'clock sharp, Liam stepped through the glass doors. His face was composed, but the hesitation in his step gave him away. He carried a leather folder tucked under one arm, his shoulders slightly too stiff. I was reviewing reports at my desk when he approached. He paused just outside my office, knocked once. "Come in," I said evenly. He stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. For a second, he just stood there, like he wasn't sure whether to sit or speak. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "Good morning, Miss Warren." I looked up, meeting his eyes calmly. "Good morning, Liam. Welcome to the Boston office. Please have a seat. He nodded, almost grateful for the normalcy, and sat down. I slid a binder across the desk toward him. This is the full financial plan for the quarter. I said, you'll be working closely with our Boston team leads. I expect detailed weekly updates starting next Monday. He nodded again, listening carefully. No small talk, no awkward apologies, no references to the party. Just professionalism I respected. That I didn't intend to make his job harder. I wasn't here to punish anyone, but I also wasn't here to make it easier. He had his role, I had mine, and our personal histories had no place inside these walls. As he left my office folder in hand, he paused briefly at the door. Thank you for giving me a chance, he said quietly. I gave a small polite nod. You earned it, I replied simply. After he left, I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. There was no sense of victory, no smug satisfaction, only a profound sense of closure. The truth had revealed itself in the quietest, most inevitable way. And all I had to do was let it happen that evening. Just as the sun was dipping below the city skyline, my phone lit up again, a long text from Claire Messy. Emotional, full of blame and desperation. You knew, didn't you? You knew Liam was transferring to your company, and you let this happen. You humiliated us. You humiliated me. Mom's been crying nonstop. Dad is furious. I can't believe you would do this to your own family on Mom's birthday. I stared at the message for a moment, letting the words hang there. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel guilt. I felt tired. Tired of carrying the weight of a family that had never truly carried me. I put the phone down and made myself a cup of ginger tea. The warmth of the mug against my palms felt grounding. After a few minutes, I picked up my phone again and typed a reply. Short, steady. I didn't plan anything. Claire, I didn't tell Liam who I was. I didn't call myself his boss. And if one simple truth was enough to ruin everything, maybe it wasn't built on anything real in the first place. I hit send without hesitation. No over-explaining. No apologizing. Just the truth. Half an hour later, another message arrived. This time from my mother. I never thought you would choose to get back at us like this. We are your family. Emma. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. Get back at them. Was that what they thought this was? I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply living my life. Without begging for a place where I was never truly welcome. Without paying to be accepted. Without shrinking myself to fit inside the small, tidy box they had built for me. I placed my phone face down and turned off the notifications. I spent the rest of the evening reading, sipping tea, and listening to the soft hum of the city outside my window. No anger, no pain, just a deep, steady kind of peace. The next morning, as I settled into my desk at the office, another email arrived. It was from Liam, the subject line, apology and goodbye. I clicked it open. Emma, I don't even know where to begin. Last night gave me a kind of clarity I can't ignore. Seeing the way your family treated you and realizing how much they tried to hide who you are made me realize I've been blind. I can't stay in a relationship built on pretense and disrespect. As of today, I'm ending things with Claire. Thank you for staying silent yesterday. Thank you for showing strength without bitterness. I respect you more than you probably know. I read it once, then again, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because Claire had lost something, not because I had gained anything, but because someone had finally seen what I had lived with for years. And they understood I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Later that afternoon, as I was reviewing project timelines, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire. Emma, please, can you talk to Liam? Tell him it was all a misunderstanding. You're his boss. You have influence. Please, just this once. I stared at the words, feeling an ache that wasn't anger or pity, just exhaustion. All those years I had wished for Claire to reach out, to care, to see me. And now that she was reaching out, it wasn't to apologize. It wasn't to mend the relationship. It was to save her own image, to fix her own broken fantasy. I didn't respond immediately. I walked to the window and watched the traffic buzz below. Life moving on, without waiting, without asking for permission. When I returned to my desk, I typed a simple reply. Liam didn't leave because of anything I said. He left because he finally saw who you are. And maybe for the first time you saw it too. I hit send. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. An hour later, another message came. You're right, but I don't want to lose him. I'll change this time. Please, Emma, help me. I put the phone down, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood. It was not my job to fix people who had spent years breaking me. A week passed. No more desperate texts, no more angry voicemails, no more pleading, just silence. And for once, the silence wasn't heavy, it wasn't sad, it was freeing. I kept going, morning coffee, late night meetings, strategy sessions that stretched past dinner. The world kept turning, and I turned with it lighter somehow. Unburdened at work, Liam stayed professional. He never mentioned Claire, never brought family into conversations. He respected the boundary without me ever having to ask. And I respected him for that. One rainy afternoon, I stopped by a small cafe near the office, a place I hadn't visited in years. I ordered a latte, found a seat by the window, and watched raindrops race down the glass. Above the counter, carved into a piece of driftwood, were the words, "Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice." I sat there for a long time, letting those words sink in, because that was the lesson I had spent years learning, the lesson my family had never been able to teach me. Family isn't about obligation. It's not about keeping up appearances. It's not about who looks better on paper. Family is where you're seen, where you're loved, where you're enough even when you're not shining. And if you can't find that in the people you were born to, it's okay to build it elsewhere. That day, I made a quiet promise to myself I would no longer measure my worth by the approval of people who only saw me when they needed something. I would no longer pay for a place in their lives. With silence, obedience, or money, I would simply live, fully, honestly, freely. Not to prove anything, not to spite anyone, but because I finally understood. Choosing yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. And it's the first step to finding the kind of home that can never be taken away. Sometimes the hardest decision you can make is to walk away from the people who taught you how to doubt your own worth. Emma didn't shout, she didn't seek revenge. She simply let the truth unfold quietly, steadily, and chose to protect her peace. Because real strength isn't in fighting to be seen by those who refuse to look. It's in knowing when to stop handing them the power to define you. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you know what it feels like to sit in a crowded room and feel invisible. To give and give and give until you forget what it feels like to be received. If you were in Emma's shoes, would you have stayed silent, or would you have fought for something that was never truly yours? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Share your story, because sometimes hearing someone else's courage can remind you of your own. And if you believe in choosing yourself without guilt, hit the like button, subscribe to EN Reddit Story, and join us every day for more real, powerful stories about quiet strength and true freedom.